Gilgaboo, Gilgaboo, Gilgaboo.
Gilgaboo the jarrow as falcheroo gus gullas Gaccan.
Manx Radio Weather with Manx Glass and Glazing.
Well, the Hampshire Jew be le brow chirimus greenach on Jew lesh gia fest temperature smooth der Celsius jägers gennichten jesh the US a green. Be chirim gen bodgelan noch as higga the vey fuer the lua ega vadran lesh in temperature tudjum dus der na 3 Celsius on spool. As be fuer the lua son rio a fair. Be le brow elia on merach nyes. And reet be a chirimus Gaelg cara chact and short chit lesh brew tui and na elian and shaw as be a began fuer onsen gia nya bjor gemert as jacrane. Irina grania she minid log she merach a shact line grania shact minid as feed log hawk Jew. And all of that again in English this time. Fine, dry and sunny today with light winds, maximum temperature 12 degrees Celsius. Feeling quite pleasant in the sun. Continuing dry and clear tonight and becoming rather chilly by dawn with minimum temperatures about 2 or 3 degrees Celsius in places. Cold enough for a slight grass frost. Then tomorrow will be another fine day. The outlook remaining dry and bright throughout the rest of the week with high pressure centred to the north of the UK dominating. However, some areas will see rather brisk easterly winds on Tuesday and Wednesday. Sunrise 6:06 tomorrow, sunset 8:27 today.
Manx Glass and Glazing are now stocking Omnia flush sash frames. See the range at the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate. Gallas Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
Hey, you with the pretty face, welcome to the so long. Where did we go wrong? Hey there, Mr. Blue Sky, so pleased to be with you. Sky, look around, see what you do. Everybody smiles at you.
And I'm hoping I'm not going to jinx the weather for the week by playing that. But it does look as though we're going to have a pretty decent sort of a week. Might even get all the veggies planted. Anyway, that's another matter. What's more important is we have a guest in the studio. Stephen Miller RBV of Annanan is over for a couple of weeks, and it's very good of you to cycle all the way up to Douglas Head. So fast am I, Stephen?
Fast am I. I cycled up to the foot of Douglas Head and then pushed the bike up. But nevertheless, I was willing.
It's
I was
a start,
willing.
isn't it?
It's a start indeed.
Yeah, the spirit is there anyway. And you've given a couple of talks to the Celtic Congress over the past couple of weeks. One on Sophia Morrison, another on well, you tell us, because we're about to talk about them. Charles Roeder and Neddy Beg, otherwise known as Edward Faragher.
Yeah, so I wish to thank Bob Coswell for giving me the opportunity, and the Celtic Congress for sponsoring the talks, and James Franklin of Culture Vannon for coming along and doing the tech, because those who are not able to make the talks, they will be up online very soon. Yeah, so it was a good opportunity. Last week I spoke about Sophia Morrison, and then this week I spoke about Edward Faragher and Carl Roeder. I think we know about Sophia Morrison. I think most people know Manx fairy tales, and I think we know about Edward Faragher as well. But I think Carl Roeder, in many ways, whilst Culture Vannon reprinted Manx Notes and Queries the other year, I think we still know little about him, and I don't think he gets the acclaim that he should have, and I think rather he was very much a prickly character, and I think the acclaim that he thinks he deserves as well. But he was German national. He moves to Manchester. We can only trace him through the census records. He turned up first working on the Manchester Ship Canal, I assume as a correspondent. Later he went into business life, worked on his own. He was a patents agent, so I rather suspect he was licensing either German machine tools into Lancashire for the cotton industry and doing it the other way round, likely. But he visited the Isle of Man in the 1880s. There's a marriage as well, which was unusual, and then he simply turns up in the census as single thereafter. Clearly the marriage didn't last, but what did last was an interest in the Isle of Man, and especially an interest in Manx folklore. And he encounters not just Edward Faragher, he also encounters John Hudson of Ballafesson. He was the weaver at Ballafesson, and other individuals as well along the way. But the important thing is is the way that he encouraged Faragher to collect folklore for him. And I think it's not really talking in terms of the pair as being, should we say, collector-informant, being seen as possibly an exploitative relationship. They clearly became friends. And I think clearly Faragher himself became a folklorist as well through that.
And why is any of this important to us in the modern age? Obviously the Manx language is having a bit of a revival in fortunes in recent decades, but things like folklore and fairy beliefs and all of these things that Neddy Beg was big on seem like a kind of a long-distant memory for the Isle of Man these days.
But it is part of our past. It is what folklorists would say, it's our oral expressive culture. It is a world that is not captured in the official record. It is a world that is captured, it's what you might say, it's unofficial knowledge, and it is captured by figures such as Edward Faragher, such as John Hudson, Roeder himself, Sophia Morrison, William Cash, and a whole host of particular figures who were really out to say, well, this is oral culture. If we don't write this down, if we don't record it, it will disappear. And with its disappearance, so too will be that little bit of Manxness will disappear. And there's a wonderful quote from Edward Faragher. He writes this wonderful sketch of old Cregnish, sort of bringing us into the social world that is Cregnish, as opposed to the folklore world of Cregnish here. And it's a lament in many ways. The little garden in front of old Etty's cottage has disappeared. The haggard where as boys we used to play amongst the stacks of corn at Tiplift Torren is like the rest of the common, and Margaret's old haggard is trodden like the highway. And I think if we don't want the Isle of Man to be trodden like the highway, if we don't want to have our distinctiveness, and we are a distinctiveness, it's not just through our institutions of the Tynwald and the Sheedings and commissioners and so on, and we have deemsters and so on. It's also through a very distinctive, although common, oral culture.
Yes, and obviously we're going to hear a lot more about that as the programme proceeds. Do you think there's anybody left in the Isle of Man that still believes in the fairies?
I would imagine so. I certainly know there are some people who still believe in charmers. There's someone I was talking to recently. Their father was a charmer, and they were rung up and asked if they could charm warts from them. And of course they couldn't, because this was a female, and it passes from male to male, female to female. So it is still there. I mean, these are reduced beliefs. They are probably not there as current as they were in the past, but I rather suspect people still, I think there are many, you can read in the Folklife survey, the whole range of opinions of people who would say, for instance, yes, absolutely believe, as Faragher himself believed in the little people, because he said, why would the old people lie to us? Other people would say things like, well, they're not about now, but they used to be about.
Yeah.
And other people would say, they've never been. I don't believe in them at all, but I like to hear stories about them.
Well, we'll hear a lot more stories after the next couple of pieces of music. And this first one is a piece of music from West Africa, which I think we've played on the programme in previous times. But it reminds me, because we were talking about fairy beliefs and the like, that those sorts of beliefs are still fairly prevalent in many African countries. And whether it's the same sorts of fairy stories that we have, I'm not so sure. But anyway, let's have a listen to this piece of music. As Manx as the Manx language. Gaelg aboo! Hooray for Manx!
Son for monument wala meni rofo bugere to wala wakar sigu sala meni rofa to wala kasada sangare meni rofa to wala sigu sala sangare Leila juru vumanga more mole ga more mole ma sene kaila bugere lenga bogare lenge mori mole ga mori mole mori deni berela se wazan langa sangare wole ga mori mole oma ko kaila marale lenge sherif wole ga mori mole omoro zile sulu golo ya sayai mama sajuna mane anno Ukeli bukari Nikoni robi wole Mama murike mba fota ima ko nyana Ukeli bukari Ale de kodo Bokari segu salam Ngone ka murike ka kolosimina wala Segu sala sangare ko Demisani do ni roba wule ni roba wule madan shit fo atra ni roba wule be bomo ilay juro mama nge mori ma wule ga mori ma wule kamane kaila baba lenge mori ma wule mama ge mori ma wule karalo kaila musa sangarenge mori mole nge mori mole turaba kaila broma jalonge mori mole nge mori mole oma bo kaila marani lenge shere fule nge mori mole omoro ne sile sulu ulo ya saya mori lo sajuna no Jalo Gafle fenga murke Bukel bukare Yoruba wole murdendu Murkolo sitigidu Ninka wole me murke jme wole Adan chefu aitra Omago aitra Jangaw ka aitra ni Yoruba wole Amani ababa Ameni fo murkenye Lake mata na ken yorobu wule Burum na mure Ilay juru mama nge mure mama nge mure mawale Mori denu brela se usala nge mori mori sangare nge mori 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 denu brela sara lenge sada mawale nge mori 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 denu brela bogare lenge bogel wale nge chei mori mongoroni sile sulu wolo ya saya mare mori sajuna mare no
Guller's Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
Arrish is arrish when you're full of the love. Arrish is arrish when you're full of the love. Arrish is arrish when you're full of the love. Arrish is arrish when you're full of the love. Arrish is arrish. Arrish is arrish. Arrish is arrish. Can't work on clear my chain. Arrish is arrish. Arrish is arrish. Arrish is arrish. Can't work on clear my chain. They make pictures of burning skies. They bring hell, it will cost your life. They bring poison and they bring pain. The stories told sound all the same. Durka-dussa, 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 creed. Arrish is arrish, I'm full of the love. 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 Arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish. Can't work on clear my chain. Arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish. Can't work on clear my chain. When their mercy fall behind, when their badness cross the line, bounded by a primal tide, somehow still the spirit survives. Durka-dussa, 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 creed. Arrish is arrish, I'm full of the lava. 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 Arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish. Can't work on clear my chain. Arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish. Can't work on clear my chain. Arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish. Can't work on clear my chain. Arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish. Can't work on clear my chain. Arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish. Can't work on clear my chain. Arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish, arrish is arrish. Can't work on clear my chain.
Haven't heard from Chasing Abbey for a few weeks, and that was Arrish as Arrish, and a fine piece of music it is too, I think. Before the adverts, we heard a piece of music from West Africa, and I suggested that maybe there would be similar fairy beliefs in Africa, but that's not the case. We've discovered while you, the listener, were listening to the pieces of music.
No, it seems to be. It's well documented for the Celtic-speaking regions of the British Isles, and there is that association that fairies are Celtic and they're only to be found in Celtic folklore. Similar figures and similar beliefs are found throughout Europe, but it seems to be associated with the Indo-European languages. So it seems it is a cultural feature of those particular languages, and that's as much as we can say at present.
Right. Fair enough. Sorry. You also referred before the break there to Hudson, or Hudson as he would be known in Manx, and he was living in Ballafesson, Hudson the feather, the weaver, and there are letters from him to Roeder.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we often can be surprised at the level of documentation that we have for Manx folklore. It's remarkable. You go to the Manx Museum Library and you can get the letters there, say, from John Hudson to Carl Roeder. You can also get the letters from Roeder to Sophia Morrison. You can get the letters from Sophia Morrison to J.J. Neen and so on. So the activities of these folklores, not only do we have what they collected, but we have letters to allow us to see how they collected. And there's a wonderful letter here from John Hudson here to Roeder, 25th of August 1896, where he's saying, we are glad to hear from you and to find that you enjoyed your visit to the island. But when you come again, we must try and make you more comfortable than to let you stretch on a couch. And clearly Roeder could have stayed in one of the boarding houses. down in Port Erin and just sort of travelled up to them, and then when it was time to sort of take his rest, simply go down there and sleep in a bed. But no, I don't think this is him slumming it. I think this is him truly wishing to experience what life was like living with Manx people.
Yeah.
And so he chooses to stay with them. And another interesting thing is that we also now know that thanks to these particular letters, that we know that Roeder learnt his Manx. Well, one, he learnt Manx, and we can suspect that, but he learnt his Manx, but he didn't learn his Manx from Edward Faragher. Again, the resources we have in the Manx Museum Library. This is Hudson's grandson writing to Sophia Morrison saying, "The late Charles Roeder took lessons in Manx from my grandfather about the year 1896. That matches the first letter that we have from Hudson to Roeder's 1896. Mr. Roeder spent a lot of time with him. How much Mr. Roeder benefited, I do not know." But another interesting point from these particular letters is when he once again writes to Roeder. Once again he writes to Morrison. This is 1915. And he's well aware that Sophia Morrison has acquired some of Roeder's writings, because Morrison one time was a housekeeper for her brother, who was a doctor in Manchester. And she wondered what had happened to Roeder's manuscripts. And she goes round to Roeder's house. And obviously he's dead, but his sister is still living there. And so she picks up material, which fortunately we now have again in the Manx Museum Library. These are letters, and these are notebooks. And she basically passed these around people. And so, for instance, Edmund Goodwin transcribes material which is now lost. And so there's one of his manuscripts here quite clear. It says Manx words, etc. from John Hudson, Weaver, Balafesson, Russian, 1896-1900. Whilst that's in Goodwin's hand, that is clearly not collected by Goodwin, and that is the material that comes from Carl Roeder. But I think another, showing you the warmth that Roeder had, or the connections that he had with these individuals. John Hudson dies in 1907, and there's a letter from his son and daughter writing to Roeder saying, telling him that he's died, and he said, "Your old friend John Hudson of Serbia has passed away." And it says, that the last line here, "We don't know will this letter find you or not, but if it does, we shall be very pleased to hear from you. And if ever you are in the Isle of Man, please call and see us. We remain your sincere friends."
Yeah. Well, that's a lovely thing. And effectively, the papers or the letters that we have from Mr. Hudson to Roeder, invaluable, would you say?
Absolutely. For instance, one of the letters there has Hoptune in Manx. And it's just those small things that these people just simply drop into the letters, perhaps thinking, well, what does he want to hear about? Well, maybe he needs to hear about this. Maybe he wants to hear about this. But the doyen, if we want to use that particular word, of collectors was Edward Faragher.
Well, time for another... actually, it's time for this. And that, of course, is our cue for an update on the weather. Be lebrow chirum as grianach on dew, be lebrow grianach as chirum on merach, be lebrow chirum as grianach on carachachtan a man. So fine and dry, sunny today, fine and dry and sunny tomorrow, fine and dry and sunny for the rest of the week. Remarkable. And it's also that, of course, our cue for a Manx track. And I will warn you, it is time to draw back the tables and chairs and have a bit of a jig, because this is Repeal the Union by MacLear.
Galas Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
as Manx as the Manx language. Gaelg aboo! Hooray for Manx!
Gaelg Jew, Gaelg J as Gaelg Sarah.
Arrish.
A Gaelg, the Manx Gaelic, Chinian Amera, the mother tongue of Elian Vannin, the Isle of Man.
Arrish.
You can catch up with more of Manx Radio's Manx language programmes in the weekly podcast Aber Rish. Say that again.
Arrish.
Shene, that's the one.
So, yes, Stephen, I forget where we were. Oh, we were talking about John Hudson, weren't we?
About John Hudson, and then moving on to Edward Faragher. Because whilst Hudson sent letters to Roeder with items of Manx folklore, Edward Faragher sent Roeder away. He also sent him letters, but he also sent him notebooks as well. We have this from 1896 here, 18th of September. Faragher writing to Roeder here saying, I have not gotten many things put in the book yet. And what these are these sort of familiar moleskin notebooks. And there are, in the Manx Museum Library, say there's 4 complete notebooks. One of them is disbound, and also it's quite clear from some of the material that's in Manx Notes and Queries, where Roeder did not have as many people sending in contributions as he had particularly hoped. And in order to fill up his columns, he was clearly drawing on the material that Faragher was sending to him. So material that is missing, as it were, from the notebooks, missing from the letters, we can say come from, again, missing letters, missing notebooks. But it's these are absolutely remarkable. We have one here from 1897, there's 2 from 1898, and there's one from 1901. You cannot go into an archive, even in a country that has a rich folklore heritage, archive, whatever, such as Ireland, should we say, for instance. If we were to turn up at the National Library of Ireland tomorrow and say, could you show us some notebooks from the 1890s written down, not by a folklorist, although I would say that Faragher is a folklorist, I'm saying someone who is inside the culture. Someone who is inside the culture, who is choosing to record their oral culture. It just doesn't. It just does. They will not be able to produce them. We can, and these are remarkable books. And what you can see is that Roeder is in many ways gives Faragher a free hand. That Faragher goes out, fills up these particular notebooks, and then when he comes back with a notebook, he then sends another notebook out to him with queries at the top of the page. And so there's one I shall read to you on here. There's a book that comes back here where Faragher has clearly made some reference to the big boy of the wind, the captain of the fairies. And he says, who and where was he and what did he do? And then Faragher tells us, the captain of the fairies. There was a young man living in Glen Chas, and he went out at night to do a job for himself, and something threw him down and tumbled him. He did not see anything, but after he got in the house, he began to feel very curious and went to bed. And I don't know, was 10 or 7 years he lay in bed, but he lay there till he died and was carried to his grave.
Goodness.
And then Faragher then says, apparently he went up to Charles Ballawhaine to see if he could be cured, but no. And he simply said that it was the big boy of the wind or captain of the fairies that came across him. And as he said, I remember the young man well. He was not much over 20 years buried, yet so it appears that the captain of the fairies is a bad chap to meet with.
Yes, you wouldn't want to bump into the captain of the fairies at all. He certainly sounds like a bit of a rascal. Yes. In terms then of this historic nature, the historically important nature of this, why is it that we don't do more, do you think? You were talking in the talk yesterday about Roeder saying to the Manx, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you going out and collecting more? Why aren't more of us in the Isle of Man actually going to the museum and poring over all these historically important documents to find out more?
I think as ever, it's a simple matter of time. If one is working Monday to Friday, then the only time one has to do any sort of research in the museum is on a Saturday. And other things then, of course, kick in. If people have family lives, people have personal lives. Maybe I don't have a personal life. No, but it's just fortunate that I've had the opportunity to work on this particular material. And often what you need is people who are retired, who then have the time, who have the interest in this, or else academics and who are sort of suggesting topics to MA students, MSc students, or people writing PhDs on this particular material. It's not just an issue in the Isle of Man as well. One can go and sit in the Irish Folklore Commission, as I was there the other year, and there's certainly more than enough space for you to sit down there. And I think it's always that particular question that if it's not a topic for one's retirement, that if one is working as a PhD student or a master's student or something, is very few career paths for you thereafter. So very few people really do have the opportunity to work on this material. I can't solve it. I can't.
Well, what we can say is that Graham, in answer to the question that we posed earlier, is there anyone out there that believes in the fairies? He says, well, I believe in the little people. And yes, whenever I pass the bridge, I always say hello, greeting them in Gaelg. And he also, Graham says that he loved the MacLear track and jigged right around the living room with a big grin, which is excellent. Time to listen now to another piece of music. This is Dinner Party by Niall Horan. I don't often play modern music. I've been trying to avoid it as best I can, but this is a modern piece of music, and it just about passed the fair enough or reasonable test. So Niall James Horan apparently is an Irish singer-songwriter, and that alone should be sufficient to allow us to listen to him.
Picking up boxes with our teeth, playing games we never played before. I was loud to sell you, so discreet, so typical of me for sure. Knives, forks, and things I've never felt before. Crashing lights when you first saw me. Yeah, I met you at a dinner party. Chandeliers, 2 a.m. coffee. Yeah, I met you at a dinner party. We were pissed drunk, fought just for fun about who would be the first to leave. One kiss on your neck, it was so concrete. I'm done looking for somebody. Behind closed doors, things I never felt before. Crashing lights when you first saw me. Yeah, I met you at a dinner party. Chandeliers, 2 a.m. coffee. Yeah, I met you at a dinner party. Crashing lights when you first saw me. Yeah, I met you at a dinner party. Chandeliers, 2 a.m. coffee. Yeah, I met you at a dinner party. Crashing lights when you first saw me. Yeah, I met you at a dinner party. Chandeliers, 2 a.m. coffee. Yeah, I met you at a dinner party.
So there we are. Niall Horan with Dinner Party. And we're not having a dinner party, but we are having quite an exciting time finding out about all the mythical creatures, or maybe not mythical creatures, of the Isle of Man. Maybe they're still out there waiting for us all to start speaking Manx again so that they can come back into our lives.
Yes, Edward Faragher believed that the fairies spoke only Manx, and that's why he was able to. But he also thought that he didn't want to eavesdrop on them because, as you know, the fairy folk can be capricious, and we never quite know how they are going to accept the actions of mortals, and many times they punish mortals for what they see as our bad behaviour. But we do have, in the Isle of Man, we clearly, as we know, we have the little people, often called themselves. As we know, the word fairy itself is taboo. People do not refer to them as such. But we also have the Fanoddery as well. The Fanoddery is familiar as the Scottish brownie. He's not all farmers, but some farms had sort of the Fanoddery, who was this hairy sprite, and the Fanoddery, all you had to do was feed him porridge, and he would thrash corn overnight for you. But the third figure we have of this sort of fairy realm is the Lianan She, and this is the fairy sweetheart. And they are dangerous characters because if you ever speak to them, then they will follow you forever. There's one story in the Folklife survey of a Manxman who had sort of met Lianan She by night and sort of spoke to her. She followed him forever. And so he moved to America thinking that would be the way to be rid of her, and she followed him to America. But we have this wonderful letter again to Roeder from 1896 here, where Faragher had been to chapel in Port Erin, and he says, "As I was on top of the hill, I met a young lady in a yellow silk dress. She passed by me. She had a white parasol in her left hand. But neither of us spoke, so the people were telling me it was the Lianan She." They are very prominent figures. They tend to be dressed in white. They're often in pairs. They have blonde hair. Many cases they dress in the latest Parisian fashion. So they stand out. They stand out. But he said, I would have spoken to her. She would have followed me. So he knows what happens if you actually speak to a Lianan She. And then he says here, "The next Sunday night I went across the hill at the same hour, intending to speak to her, but she was not there." And it shows you the depth of belief. And this is what Faragher is showing us. He not only just records this particular material for Roeder, but he also includes his own insights, perceptions, however you want to say it. You know, he reflects. He reflects upon the material that he is collecting.
And that's a bold thing for Neddy Beg to do, isn't it? Because, well, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, just having a strange fairy creature following you for the rest of your life may not sound too awful, but on the other hand, maybe it is.
Well, there's also one incident where you didn't even have to speak to the Lianan She. There's a fairy house on Ballahick, and there were two farm boys went in there and danced because there's a big dance going on, and one of them then was sweating so much that he asked this woman for a lend of her handkerchief to wipe his brow, and that woman was a Lianan She, and as he sort of brushed his brow, that was it. And then he disappeared. The fairy house disappeared, and it disappeared for 7 years and one day. But he was saved from fairyland. He was actually able to escape the fairy house. It's a wonderful world. It's a wonderful world that Faragher describes in this one as well. And he was also spotted one time. This is somewhere nearby Glen Chas or something of this one. There were people here saying, "I was alone and had no one with me, but they all said that they saw some person besides me dressed in white. But I did not believe them, although they all affirmed it was the truth. But the Glen Chas is a likely place for fairies, with its deep glen and running stream."
Mm-hmm. Well, if you do happen to be walking up over the How, because it's going to be a fine evening, and you see someone dressed in the latest Parisian fashion, and looking, well, blonde hair and rather tall and mysterious, might be just as well to go the other direction and avoid the lian and she. What would you do, Stephen?
That said, there is a herb that you can take that actually removes the lian and she from your life. It's in Sophia Morrison's paper, but the person who told Sophia Morrison about it said that they'd forgotten which herb it was. So I think discretion is the
Try them all.
Just discretion is the better part of valour.
Yes, I think that might well be the right answer. What wasn't the right answer, though, was when a few years ago, Annie, my wife, had a new pair of sunglasses, and they were very large, dark-looking sunglasses. And I said to her, do you know, they make you look like Roy Orbison. And that wasn't the right answer, apparently. And the reason I mentioned Roy Orbison is he's up next. I drove all night.
Galas Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
I had to escape, the city was sticky and cruel. Maybe I should have called you first, but I was dying to get to you. I was dreaming while I drove the long straight road ahead. Yeah. Could taste your sweet kisses, your arms open wide. This fever for you was just burning me up inside. I drove all night to get to you. Is that alright? I drove all night, crept in your room, woke you from your sleep to make love to you. Is that alright? I drove all night. What in this world keeps us from falling apart? No matter where I go, I hear the beating of our one heart. I think about you when the night is cold and dark. Yeah. No one can move me the way that you do. Nothing erases this feeling between me and you. I drove all night to get to you. Is that alright? I drove all night, crept in your room, woke you from your sleep to make love to you. Is that alright? I drove all Could taste your sweet kisses, your arms open wide. This fever for you is just burning me up inside. I drove all night to get to you. Was that alright? I drove all night, crept in your room. Is that alright? I drove all night. I drove all night to get to you. Is that alright?
Manx Radio Weather with Manx Glass and Glazing.
Well, be lebrau chirmas grianach on Julish. Gia fest, temperele smooth air Celsius Jägers, Gaccan, Jesh the US green. Fine and dry, and sunny today with light winds, maximum temperature 12 degrees Celsius, feeling quite pleasant in the sun. Continuing dry and clear tonight and becoming rather chilly by dawn with minimum temperatures about 2 or 3 degrees Celsius in places, cold enough for a slight grass frost. Then tomorrow will be another fine day. Bí chirim gin bargelan nach as higa the ve fua the lua ega vadran leis an tempralis todium dus dena 3 Celsius on spool as bí fua the lua son ro a fair. Bí lebrau elia on merach nyes and riet bí chirim as Gaelg carachach and shortchit leis brew tuian na elian and shaw as bí began fua onsen here nya bjor gemurtus crane. So the outlook remaining dry and bright through the rest of the week with high pressure centred to the north of the UK dominating. However, some areas will see rather brisk easterly winds on Tuesday and Wednesday. Sunrise 6:06 a.m. tomorrow, sunset 8:27 p.m. today. Irina Grania, Shea Minad Lug Shea Merach, as Lina Grania, Shark Minad as Feed, Lug Hacht Jew.
Manx Glass and Glazing are proud to be celebrating 40 years serving the Isle of Man's glazing needs. Visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate. Guller's Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
Hi, this is Madonna. This is the station everyone is talking about.
Taste for danger.
And that was, after a few little hesitant starts and stops, that was Madonna with Beautiful Stranger. Well, we don't have any strangers in the studio, as far as I know. We only have Stephen Miller, but I say only. Stephen Miller RBV, recipient of the highest award that there is for Manx culture. And we've talked about that in the past, Stephen. But still, I'm going to call you that. What are we talking about next?
We could talk about what happened to Edward Faragher. I mean, he didn't live out his days in Cregnish, and he had to leave his daughter and his grandchildren. His daughter emigrated to the New World, and he was left on his own. And he had to go and live with his son, and his son lived in Alfreton in Derbyshire, and it was a mining village. And there's a letter that he writes about. And this letter is so sad. I mean, it's 25th of March 1907. He just arrived there in Derbyshire, and he says, "I'm not longing for much but a sight of the sea." And clearly, he was never going to get that again. And he wasn't to live much longer after that. He dies in 1908. We have a letter here from his son. Again, this is the level of documentation that we do have here well, it's not. This letter is not actually in the Manx Museum Library. It's in Manchester Central Library that Roeder deposited some of his papers in that library before his death. And he simply says here, "My father passed away very, very peacefully at 8 o'clock on Friday morning. It was a happy release." And he says, "Will you please let the people in the island who are interested in him, whom you know." And then Roeder writes a letter to the Isle of Man Examiner, sort of saying that you have to inform me of the death of our old friend, and saying, that he broke up his home at Cregnish in consequence of his housekeeping widowed daughter and her 2 sons emigrating to Canada. "I know it cost him a great fight, and it was with a bleeding heart he had to tear himself away from the native heath which he so deeply loved." And there is an incredibly touching letter. As I say, they are definitely friends. This is not an exploitative relationship. They are both folklorists and they are both friends. And that's not trying to be sort of over-egging the pudding on this one, trying to be very woke about this. I think it's clearly so. And we get this letter
and
here.
what a nice thing that is. A really, really good thing that... they were working on a project together because they both believed in its value.
Absolutely. And without these notebooks and without the Manx Notes and Queries column, where you can see, because Manx people, which enraged Roeder because Manx people did not contribute items, he had to draw on the notebooks and letters that we now know are lost.
Yeah.
And
thankfully he did.
Thankfully,
but yeah. Anyway, we'll come on to more shortly, but we've got 2 pieces of music coming up. Now we've got Clichair Goll, which is Bluebells by, I think it's Gwilym Bowen Rees. Maybe not. If anyone knows otherwise, let me know. Text 166177 or email studio@manxradio.com. And the other is Sorley by Nightworks. But we'll have some adverts between those 2 pieces of music. As Manx as the Manx language. They should have a year for that.
Roedd yr haul yn teiri bod i'n haw, a'r llwybr gwyrddlas yn ein gwaf, ac fe glwsom glychau mwynion mai, yn galw arna ni'n dau. Mi roedd hi yn wanwyn o lligi, a'i sgwrs yn hyfryd ganddi hyd, a ches deimlad fel na ches i'r ioen, fel tan yn rhy o dan yng nghroen. Yn dan o fy mhenni'n rhaid, a'i gwyn yn cyflymu'r gwaith, ar fin y môr, o o glychar Goll. Cuddio'r gwir mewn hannar gwyn, a nysu am ei choflaid glyn. Cuddio serch mewn geiriau gwawd, a mywyd rhwng ei bus a'i bawd. A phob am hyallt i hen ffoi, a'r ysfan ffrwd yn brwd gyffroi. I nofio'r môr o glychar Goll. Neb yn glist na'n dyst ond dail, doedd neb yn llygad ond yr hael. Neb mond hi a fi yn fyd, yr unig bobl yn y byd. A dyma blymion ddwrn i'r don, i nenid barodd flwyddyn gron. I eigion môr o glychar Goll. Breuddwyd ofer gobaith ffôl, oedd cael aros yn ei chôl, ac mi glywaf glychau mwynion mai, yn canu'n iach i ni'n dau. Ond mi gadwai hon ynghell fy myron, yr enid barodd flwyddyn gron. Ac mi gofia i tra meddaf cof, ei dal mewn môr o glychar Goll.
Station and Nation running over
Galas Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
In Rossi and became aware of differences between the history I read in books and the oral accounts I heard around me. I have been very skeptical of what might be called received history. The million people, for instance, who died in Ireland in the 19th century, the million more who had to emigrate, the thousands of families forced from their homes in the Highlands and Islands. Why was all that? Famine, overpopulation, improvement, the Industrial Revolution, expansion overseas. You see, not many of these people understood such words. They knew only Gaelic. But we know now another set of words: clearance, empire, profit, exploitation. And today we live with the bitter legacy of that kind of history. Our Gaelic language is threatened with extinction. Our way of life besieged by the forces of international big business. Our country is beggared by bad communication. Our culture is vitiated by the sentimentality of those who have gone away. We have, I think, a deep sense of generation and community, but this has in so many ways been broken. We have a history of resistance, but now mainly in the songs we sing. Our children are bred for emigration, 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 emigration. And that was Scottish Gaelic. What would you call them? I don't. There's probably some special name for that sort of music, but Scottish Gaelic band Nightworks with Sole. And great piece of music, I think. Right, where were we up to, Stephen?
We were talking about the exile, if we want to use that term, of, and I think it is true. I mean, he has to leave. Edward Faragher has to leave Craignish. He ends up in this mining village in Derbyshire, but he's not there long. But before he dies, as we say, he dies in June 1908. But we do have a letter here from the 14th of April 1908 sent to Roeder, and I think from the date of the letter, this must be the last letter that passed between them. And he starts here: "Dear Mr. Roeder, I received the tobacco and the paper this morning and desired you to be thankful." This is another sort of unrealised aspect here, is that Roeder would send Faragher tobacco. He would also send him money orders from time to time, so this is sort of a financial subvention for him. He also sent him a pipe once when his pipe was broken. And the mention of the paper is the Isle of Man Examiner. And Roeder would send him the Examiner every week, and by the Examiner turning up, that Faragher knew that he was still alive. But this letter, I mean, there's a very poignant sentence in here where he writes, "Yet I often think of you, and but very few beside you." And, that's just a heartbreaking phrase. And the letter ends where he says, "I must now conclude and remain your friend, Edward Faragher." All of the other letters we have, all of the other 41 letters we have from Faragher to Roeder are not signed so. They are either signed, "Sincerely yours, Edward Faragher," "Yours sincerely, Edward Faragher." He chooses to end this letter by saying, "I remain your friend, Edward Faragher." And another sad point about this is we have another the obituary or the notice that Roeder sent into the Examiner, where he says, I would have written before, but unfortunately the letter which announced his death only reached me today, having been away from business during Whit Week. So he didn't even have a chance to attend the funeral.
Yeah.
So he just...
And not living that far away if he was in Manchester, so he could potentially
I'm
have
certain
got,
that Roeder would have turned up for the funeral.
Yeah.
Absolutely no doubt about that. But that does show you that I think it's right for us to talk of them as folklorists and to talk of them as friends.
And when he died, he was buried presumably in what was the name of the town? Alfreton. But an unmarked grave.
I believe so.
How sad.
Absolutely, how sad.
Yeah,
He has to leave Craignish. He's longing much for the sight of the sea, which he was not going to see again. He moves to, which was only a grim existence, a mining town in the 1900s, and then to end up in an unmarked grave, and also to end up with his dear friend not being able to attend his funeral, not knowing that he had died.
Yeah. Yes, well, on that far from cheery note, is there anything that can cheer us up before we have the weather?
Well, we can look at Sophia Morrison and see how Sophia Morrison was seen by others.
Absolutely. Let's have a listen.
Yes, I mean, Sophia Morrison was another of these figures who clearly was a very warm and engaging character. We have some of these, these are sort of extracts from these letters. Letter here from Cressy Dodd to Sophia in 1910. By the way, I've not thanked you for your kind thought in sending me the Manx knobs, though I've been chewing all the time. And this was when she was sending Morrison some folk songs that she collected in Patrick. And
this is Dodd's the Pop from Beeal, is it?
I've no idea, possibly. Unless Sophia Morrison made them herself. I don't quite know. And then we have here, this is T.E. Corkle, 1912, writing from New Zealand. Here was a copy of Manx Fairy Tales, produced by and edited by Sophia Morrison, made its way to New Zealand, where he writes, a small half-Manx girl to whom I've been reading them has just pronounced judgment, which I will pass on in the hope that you will appreciate it. She says they are jolly decent.
Jolly decent. Well, that's a good start, isn't it? Yes, we could cope with things being jolly decent. Well, I think what we'll do now is we will have an early weather forecast for a change, because we're always late with the weather forecast, and then we'll have a track from Beeal. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need the jingle first.
Radio Gaelg.
And that is the cue for the weather forecast, which is pretty simple, to be honest. I don't really need to look it up on the computer. Be le brow chirmas greenach on dew. Be le brow chirmas greenach on merach as be le brow chirm as greenach on bunus dak less a chact and short shit. So fine, dry and sunny today, fine, dry and sunny tomorrow, fine, dry and sunny for pretty much every day in the week to come, which is excellent news if you're wanting to get your vegetables planted. Right, what's next? Yes, The Girls of Balladule by Beeal.
Galas Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
the mighty beeal there with the Girls of Balladooel, an excellent tune, wonderful tune to play in a session, that. And I didn't give you a warning about jigging about the kitchen table. I hope no misdemeanours have occurred as a result of that. But that's the way when you forget to say things. Have we had? Yes, we do have gosh, we're trying to find my way through here. There it is. Right. Robert wants a piece of music playing, which is coming up shortly. He also wants to know what is it's not much, but I call it home. And I will tell you that when we play the piece of music, when we get to it. But first, Stephen, where were we up to with Sophia Morrison?
We're talking about how people came across Sophia Morrison, or their interactions with Sophia Morrison. We had that wonderful story there of the Manx fairy tales being sent off to New Zealand and being read. And we also have another story here about Manx fairy tales here. This is Florence Quine of Santon School in 1915. She won a copy of Manx fairy tales in a competition to collect Manx folk tales. And she writes to Sophia Morrison, I'm so sorry to hear you being in hospital. As we know, towards the end of her life, Sophia Morrison had problems with her ears and problems with her eyes. She was going deaf, and clearly other health issues there. And she says, well, I hope you'll soon be quite well again, for the schoolmaster, Mr. Lace, tells us scholars how much you have done for the Manx language, and there is no one to do this work so well. And then we get a letter to, again, I always come back to this, the richness of the archive that we have here to draw on. Here we have a letter from Richard Lace himself to Sophia Morrison here. On behalf of my scholars and for myself too, I beg to thank you very much for your kind letter and neat book prize to a scholar, encouraging interest in folklore and rendering valuable educational aid. And again, we've mentioned how Sophia Morrison was ill. She was occasionally in hospital. And here you have Esther Bridson, and she shared a ward with Sophia Morrison at Noble's Hospital in 1916, and she writes to her, however am I to thank you for sending me such a number of books? All I want now is just a quiet little time to look them over. Absolutely incredibly touching, incredibly touching. And when she dies, we have a letter here from Beatrice Lindsay, which almost can stand as a wonderful memorial for her. Her refined character, affectionate yet reticent, was told in her speaking, beautiful eyes. Her industry and methods and enthusiasm in her work. This was the tribute to Louisa Morrison, one of Sophia Morrison's sisters, on hearing of her death.
Well, we'll hear a little bit more about Sophia Morrison as we proceed. And I should say it is absolutely, definitely Sophia Morrison, not Sophia Morrison. Somebody made that mistake. I think I've heard a few people making that mistake recently. But yes, Sophia Morrison we'll hear about shortly. But first, Robert asks for me to put into Manx, it's not much, but I call it home. Not as ever with Robert's requests for translations. It's not always easy to do these, but I have gone with Hene Mona E, Oxy and Tai Hene Mona E. It's not much, or tisn't much it. It's the literal way of saying that. Hene Mona E, Oxy and Tai but it is the house at me. It is my home. So it's not much, but I call it home. And Robert asked for me to play this song by Diana Ross, which hopefully is going to work now. And this is Do You Know Where You're Going To by Diana Ross.
Do you
And that was for Robert. Oh, gosh. That was Diana Ross with Do You Know Where You're... Was it Where You're Going To? I think that's it. Anyway, so hopefully Robert enjoyed that. And I hope you, the listener, are enjoying this little conversation we're having with Stephen Miller, and we're discussing Sophia Morrison.
Yes, I had a chance to give a paper at Trinity College Dublin earlier in the year on the use of music in the Pan-Celtic revival, or the Pan-Celtic enthusiasm, or the Pan-Celtic movement, however you wish to look at it. And I thought a useful way of looking at Morrison's activities, sort of try and use this as a framework for her other activities outside of folk song, is to look at her as a collector, as a pioneer, and this is in a pioneer in the sense of collecting with the phonograph, looking as a mentor, the other people who she drew into her circle. We already mentioned there of Cressy Dodd and the Manx Knobs, and almost as a reward for collecting folk songs in Patrick. As her work as an editor, she had an idea, sort of had a project to try and publish from the Clegg Tune books, and also to her promotion of Manx folk song as well, and other sort of Manx folklore in general as well. And we have again, I'm stressing this again, the amount of documentation we have to see people like her in the field. And this is from her letter copybook. She kept copies of some of her outgoing correspondence as well. Here she's writing to W.H. Gill, he of Manx National Songs, he of the Manx National Music, and he is a song collector in his own right with his brother Deemster Gill, and in collaboration with Dr. John Clegg. Here in 1907, I think more scraps of music might still be gained. I heard some bits the other day in Sulby Glen at the house of Mrs. Crane, but when Mrs. Crane and her daughter told me that they had often sung to you, I felt assured that you had collected all they have to give. Now, this is Elizabeth Crane of Coolbane at Sulby, and this is also the daughter, is also called Elizabeth Crane as well, but also showing that Morrison is out here in the field collecting, but it also shows that W.H. Gill was back in the island collecting as well. We lose all link in one sense with Gill because his brother dies in 1899, so there's no more correspondence between them. And his papers are lost as well, and so we rely on these little one line that you read in a letter. You sort of think, aha, Gill's back collecting again. But we also know that she collected with Josephine Kermode. She didn't collect alone. She was out there with Cushik, as she was known, and there's a wonderful letter to her. Again, that the Kermode family papers are in fact they are stuffed full of the song collecting, because she was collecting with Sophia Morrison. So we find that some of the folk song material is in amongst Morrison's own papers, and we find some of the material is also amongst Josephine Kermode's own papers. So we have this letter here in 1910 saying, I should think if there's any truth in the old saying, you of all people should possess a Bollen cross. Country roads are sometimes misleading, and she encloses a cross Bolen for luck. So I think quite clearly that if you're going out in the countryside trying to find singers, trying to find people to collect folklore from, that having Cushig lead the way was perhaps not the best of ideas.
So do you have a cross Bolen?
No, I don't.
Because you famously got lost in the studio in the radio last time.
Absolutely true. Yes, yes. Well, they should be issued at the door in that particular, along with passes.
Well, we'll hear now from Dusty Springfield, who's going to sing about the son of a preacher man. As Manx as the Manx language. They should have a year for that.
Manx Radio. Billy Ray was a preacher's son, and when his daddy would visit, he'd come along. When they gathered around and started talking, Cousin Billy would take me walking. Out through the backyard we go walking. Then he looked into my eyes. everything is alright. You kiss and tell me everything's alright. Can I get away again tonight? The only one who could ever reach me was the son of a preacher man. The only boy who could ever teach me was the son of a preacher man. Yes, he was. He was. The Lord knows he was. Yes, he was. How well I remember the look was in his eyes, stealing kisses from me on the slide, taking time to make time, telling me that he's all mine, learning from each other's knowing, looking to see how much we've grown, and the only one who could ever reach me was the son of a preacher man. The only boy who could ever teach me was the son of a preacher man. Yes, he was. He was. Oh, yes, he was. The only one who could ever reach me was the sweet talking son of a preacher man. The only boy who could ever teach me was the son of a preacher man. The only one who could ever fool me sweet was the son of a preacher man. The only one who could ever fool me was the son of a preacher man.
Well, we don't have the son of a preacher man, but we do have Stephen Miller. But before we hear from Stephen, Sue Corran writes in, "Hey Phil, I write to complain at you playing such a jaunty Gaelg jig." That was earlier the Girls of Belladool from Barul. I was in my greenhouse tending my cacti and ended up with several big pricks. My feet didn't protect me from a destructive jig. Thank you as ever for a brilliant Manx show when we've lost too much. And that's from Sue Corran. We have another little chunk of time left to talk about, and we're going to move on to talking about John Clegg.
You talk about Clegg. I mean, Dr. John Clegg, as we know, dies 1908. His collection is his whole library and personal papers passed to who was then Canon Cooley, later becomes Archdeacon John Cooley. He has the living then, the rectory at Andros, and he basically clears out Crofton, which is where Dr. John Clegg lived, and took this material all the way up to Andros. But at one particular time, one particular stage, Sophia Morrison, together with Josephine Kermode, they turn up at his doorstep in 1913, just as he was about to leave. I don't know if this is time, but they certainly timed it well, actually. And they asked for copies of, could they see the Clegg collection? And this is when Morrison was starting to publish Mannon, and there was the idea was to put some of the tunes into Mannon, but also Morrison had the idea of doing a memorial volume for him. As you know, the memorial volume that came out was Manx Reminiscences, but she was hoping that the tune books would be published, or a selection of material from the tune books. As we know, Manx National Songs had appeared, we know that Manx National Music had appeared, but the tunes then were... They were boulderized in many particular ways. You know, they were devised for the pianoforte, for the drawing room in effect. And what Morrison wanted to do was to publish the tunes as they had been originally collected. And this is what she says when the material appears in Mannon. You know, the songs were heard by the doctor and taken down by him as he went his rounds among the people. And that's what she wanted to do. But in order to publish them in Mannon, or in order to put together the proposal for Kerwin, you have to have the tune books. And they were in Cooley's hands. And she goes and obtains them. And no sooner does she obtain them, then she passes them on to Edmund Goodwin, who makes a full transcript of the material, also indexes them as well. And then Morrison announces that Cooley had donated them to the Manx Language Society, which he had not done so. And I think this is a wonderful and much needed act of cultural piracy.
Well, absolutely, because most of the music the Manx traditional music that's heard these days, a huge amount of it at least comes from the Clegg collection.
Absolutely. The material passes to Cooley. Cooley moves to Andros. He goes, and then when he retires as Archdeacon of Man, it's just quite clear that there seems to have been an enormous bonfire or some ways. And the only material that survives from Clegg are 24 notebooks, similar to the Edward Faragher notebooks. There's also a notebook which is a diary pressed into service, which is clearly the notes for Manx reminiscences, and the fortune books. And they only come in 1935 to the Manx Museum Library, and there's almost a note as though, well, there's nothing really Manx about these. The tunes are similar to other tunes collected elsewhere in the British Isles, which of course is what you would expect. And you feel that there's a sense that they are almost reluctantly handed over to the museum, as though they're not really worth keeping. And I think thanks to Morrison, and I think this is Morrison's attitude in many ways, is why should this material stay in people's hands? This is material that Manx folk, collected from Manx folk, and this material should be made available for Manx folk. And we can see her doing this. I mean, she sets up Mannin. We've never had a magazine like Mannin since, which is unfortunate. You know, there was a vehicle there for creating a sense of Manxness. And we also have her what was once described a quite unique Manx tea party and concert of national music. She promotes Manx music. So it's not just a question of let's just collect it, squirrel it away. No, we'll collect it, we'll certainly squirrel it away. We'll also safeguard it if needed, and we'll also promote it. And so she puts on every year from 1905 to 1913 at the Albert Hall, the one in Peel, not the smaller, less illustrious one in London. She put on a Manx music concert, and it was this, and it was often repeated in the year as well. And this is just absolutely, when you look at fortunately we have some of the leaflets for this surviving, and you can see that it is full of recitations, songs, often to not just material in Manx as well. There's someone singing an Irish song, someone singing a Welsh song as well, and this is a sense of promoting Manxness.
Very sadly, I have to say, because I could sit and listen to you for another 2 hours. That's just about us for Gullers Gaccan this week. Bobby Bob is raring to go in Studio 1 with Claire na Gael. But Stephen Miller, good on my Morrids, thanks very much for coming on Gullers Gaccan.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk.
And now,
Gullers Gaccan, brought to you by the Gaelic Broadcasting Committee.
We're going to hear from the animals. The House of the Rising Sun.
There is a house in New Orleans they call the Rising Sun. tell your children not to do what I have done. Spend your lives in sin and misery in the house of the rising sun.